Having endured the insults and criticisms of the Trump administration for the past 4 years, it appears the mainstream media is intent on proving that it's not biased. The mission: get tough on President Biden.
This week, CNN hosts Wolf Blitzer and John King were reminiscing about their years in the White House when King offered these words of advice to newly named Chief White House Correspondent Caitlin Collins.
Trump supporters are watching us. We need to hold this administration accountable. We need to ask tough questions.
The New York Times has already started. In an otherwise newsy report about Biden's inauguration, reporter Peter Baker put the president on notice, saying he will be constantly watched by friends and foes alike for signs of mental decline. And NBC's Chuck Todd is in on the act too, warning Biden that Judgment Day is nigh.
He has to fulfill that first vaccination promise. If Biden doesn't get it right, he will have failed on the job.
And right on cue, as Biden was signing his executive orders this week, the AP's Zeke Miller suggested 100 million doses was kind of a low bar, prompting this testy response.
When I announced it, you all said it's not possible. Come on, give me a break, man. That's a good start. 100 million.
No word on whether Biden was irked by this Times report, saying a $2,500 Peloton bike doesn't comport with his regular Joe from Scranton persona. So much for the honeymoon.
You know, Lylah, I gotta love Joe Biden. He does have a little, he has kind of a testy temper there, which I like. But, you know, honestly, there's a false equivalency going on here. I mean, of course the press is going to be tough on President Biden. They're tough on all presidents. But somehow they feel like they have to prove that they're going to be as tough as they were on Donald Trump. But Donald Trump made hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of lies and misstatements over the course of his 4 years, presuming that is not going to happen. So you can't apply the exact same standard.
I think there's a bit of defensiveness there. And yes, I totally agree with you on the false equivalency. The one thing I'm really happy to see is PolitiFact's Biden promise tracker, because to me, that's more about accountability. Mm-hmm. He has made a lot of promises. We need to track and see what happens with them. And it's good to have a handy reference to go back and say, okay, is this what he promised? Is this what's really happening? But other than that, I'm seeing a lot of defensiveness, kind of saying, oh, you thought we couldn't be unbiased and now we're going to be unbiased. But really, there's a lot that's going to happen where we're highlighting things that really aren't that important. The Peloton bike, the security issue, sure. But then that's an issue with the bike, not an issue about image or regular Joe from Scranton or any of that. So I think there's a bit of a reach there, and I'm hoping that we've learned lessons from the last 4 years and can just get back to accurately reporting what's going on without having to weigh in and paint things as good or bad at every moment.
You know, I agree with Lylah. There is a false equivalency, and you can always tell when Joe Biden gets a little testy, he throws a man on the end of the sentence, right? You know, all of this aside, of course we have to be tough on him. That's our job as journalists, to be skeptical, to hold people to account. Of course, that's the job. You know, one of the most refreshing things that I saw on Inauguration Day was Jen Psaki holding her first news conference and promising truth and transparency. Now, you know, they're going to be a mouthpiece for an administration, but how refreshing was it to hear that she has access to him, that she says, you know, I work for a guy who's paid for by the American people, so I work for him, so that's my job to communicate with you. It was just so refreshing for me to hear that after hearing 4 years of treasonous, enemy of the people, and fake news.
It really shouldn't be that hard to get it right. All you have to do is report on what the Biden administration does, or as Lylah suggested, what they said they were going to do that they failed to do. That's fine. Ask aggressive questions, dig into all that, and you'll provide valuable reporting. The speculation, that Chuck Todd comment about how Biden has failed in his job if he doesn't meet this vaccine threshold, it was ridiculous, made more ridiculous by the fact that you could tell watching him deliver the comment that he thought he was being really intense and hard-hitting. He was just being a dope. The Peloton thing, if the New York Times got out more institutionally, I think they'd learn that people in Scranton and other places have Peloton bikes. Just stick to what's happening or what isn't happening that was supposed to, and we'll be A-okay.
Look, the Peloton thing was a little silly, but I think there's a little context that's missing here, which is that many Democratic presidents have not liked the press and have had a tough relationship with the press. the relationship between the press and the president isn't partisan, it's structural. The press corps sees itself as a watchdog. Its role is to be a watchdog. Its role is to ask tough questions and hold them to account. You know, I watched some of Jen Psaki's second press conference yesterday. It was very standard. People asked tough questions. She dodged some of them. She spun some of them. That's her job. That's their job. And what I'd love to see is the press briefings becoming standard and boring like that and not being an opportunity for grandstanding on either side. And let's get the really interesting reporting around the edges and let the press briefings just do their very boring job.
You know, Lylah, I think there's a shell shock thing going on here, too, because I was doing an Emily's List today about all the words that have come up that seem so ridiculous, but normal and, you know, standard. And so a return to normalcy is hard to grasp in some ways. And going back to the it's even hard to remember what it was like at these press briefings and so forth 4 years ago. But, you know, applying those old standards, I'm not sure that the old standards are ever going to apply, which is why part of this defensiveness is taking place, because the media was really whipped.
I think so. And I think it's worth remembering that the audience, the consumers, there's an appetite for outrage that has been fed for the last 4 years that was starting to be fed before the Trump administration. The whole confirmation, not information thing, that's still happening. And right now, what I'm seeing a lot of in some of the examples that you showed is a concerted effort to prove that we're going to be impartial by looking for outrage where none exists.
Exactly.
And I'm hoping that shakes out.